Hello, everyone. Happy Thursday. Thank you for joining us today at RSI's Lunch and Learn webinar. Today, we are going to take an in-depth look beyond the basics at comprehensive criminal screening for enhanced security and reporting compliance. Just a reminder, we are recording the webinar today, and the recording and slides will be sent out via email within the next day or two. As always, we'd like to start with our legal disclaimer. We are a consumer reporting agency and we are not attorneys, so any information given in today's webinar is educational in nature and should not be considered legal advice. And now just to introduce those of us who are presenting today, I'm Stephanie. I work in compliance and special projects. Presenting along with me will be Brad, RSI's president and COO, Alicia, our director of operations and compliance, and Heather from our client services team. Our agenda today covers the importance of comprehensive screening, a look at the different states redacting personal data from records, a specific look into the different types of reports included in a comprehensive background check, like the National Criminal, Sex Offender Registry, Patriot Data, county and state records, and federal criminal. We will then discuss the difference between a comprehensive and basic search, along with a look at the 7-year reporting standard. Throughout the presentation, if you have any questions at all, please submit them in the Q&A chat so that we can answer them as we go. I believe Brad is going to start us off with a first look at comprehensive screening.
Yeah, thank you, Stephanie. Good morning, everybody. I think when we put this together, we really had those folks in mind that really wanted to kind of peel the onion back, if you will, kind of take a look at where we get these reports, some of the differences in data. There's certainly been lots of changes over the years with what data sources are available and the personal information that's associated with that data. So we hope to talk about all that today. And when we talk about comprehensive screening, which we'll try to help define for you, we're really have in mind, what are we doing to protect your organization from liability? What are we doing to provide trust? How are we mitigating negligent hiring risk? Those of you that have to comply with regulations, so all those things kind of come in mind. But when we think about some of the challenges that we face in this industry, a lot of it is just in the complexity of the criminal records and the need for the thoroughness that we hope to provide for you in reviewing those records and reporting things back to you. There are many national data sources, state data sources, even the state data sources that are becoming increasingly more complex. And when we think of that, we're thinking about the privacy concerns at the state level primarily, where a lot of this information is getting redacted or removed completely from the public record. And when we look at records, we're looking at the same public record that anyone can that walks off the street. So a lot of the folks in these states are saying, we just don't want anybody walking off the street seeing information about someone's past that shouldn't be there. So they're redacting information beyond 7 years, or they're taking out date of birth information, or they're removing social security numbers and things of that nature. And while that's important, is because if you're a thorough CRA like Reference Services, we need at least 3 personal identifiers to ensure accuracy. Some in our space will do that with 2 identifiers, but that becomes really, really risky. So to give you an example, how many Jack Smiths are there across the country with the same birth year? So that doesn't give you a lot of confidence that we have the proper Jack Smith in this case. So having a date of birth, having a full social address history, things like that is really important to our industry. So I'll start too with kind of an update from the Professional Background Screeners Association. Negligent hiring is really at the heart of what we're trying to protect. And when we think about comprehensive screening, the Professional Background Screeners Association is now documenting cases well over $1 million. And more importantly, they're also saying that these plaintiff lawyers are no longer simply asking the question of, did you run a background check? That's almost an assumption. But now they're asking the question of, what did you do? How comprehensive was that check? What did you really find out? And honestly, if you're not looking deep enough into the sources that are out there, then you're still putting yourself at risk for negligent hiring lawsuits, even though you're doing quote unquote a background check. So we really want to understand the differences, and that's what we hope to kind of shed a light on today. So I'll turn it over to Alicia. We're going to talk about just the redaction at different states and some of those states that are giving us fits, if you will.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. Like Brad said, the recommended rule is to have at least 3 personal identifiers. So just some examples of what we're working with on the back end while we're working the criminal portion of the background check. Michigan, several years ago, they began redacting the date of birth from court records. Virginia, some courts provide partial dates of birth, such as a month and a day only or year only, and only a full date of birth can be considered a matching identifier. For Kansas and South Carolina, most counties only return the year of birth. In California, the court records of set-aside convictions are being sealed retroactive to 1973. Records returned only have name and date of birth and never an address or anything additional. Connecticut is one of the states that have adopted the clean slate law, automatically erasing or expunging certain felonies, and most misdemeanors have after a certain period of time. This includes some pardons. And then federal courts, federal rules require redaction of certain personal information in public court documents, including the social security number, dates of birth, names of minor children, financial account information, and in criminal cases, home addresses. So with these records, a lot of times we're going down rabbit holes, searching newspaper articles, sometimes social media platforms, looking for anything that we can find that might connect the applicant to or eliminate them from the record.
Yeah, so what we're going to attempt to do too is try to better define or clearly define for you what we're talking about these different data sources. So I'm going to start off talking about the national data, then Alicia will jump back in talking about more some of the what we call federal data, federal district data, and then also some of the state and local stuff. So when we talk about national criminal data sources, we're talking about a very large list. We have over 2,200 data sources in our NatCrim list. These include various sources from state repositories, courts, U.S. government, like the sex offender registries, Office of Inspector General, FBI. And we call this data pointer data. And the reason we do that is because by law, RSI cannot report from this data. We must verify anything that we see at the national level at the local county court level where the original court records reside. So most of this data, it again points us to something with more information. This data is good. However, it's not all inclusive. So we see a lot of times where people come to us and say, well, I'm running a $10 background check, and I know immediately all they're doing is they're just looking at this NatCrim data, which is extremely dangerous because it doesn't give us all the identifiers that we need to properly report off of. So you have a huge importance of verifying this data because a lot of it is incomplete or simply outdated. So I mentioned that it includes the sex offender registry, so I wanted to put this in here because this number just continues to grow. It's sex offender registry information obviously is an important piece of this puzzle for those that work with children or the elderly. Everybody wants to know. And I'm pulling a record here from August 2024 that reports almost 800,000 sex offenders are registered across the country. So then lastly, inside the same data set, that 2,200 data sources, we have what we call the Patriot data. And so if you look at our report, you'll see a national criminal and then it'll say PS, and that's the same Patriot data that I'm talking about here. What we're doing is we're stripping those sources out and we're just looking at those on a name match only so that we can thoroughly vet out any information on the Patriot level. So Patriot data includes inclusions lists at the state and federal level. We're talking about Medicaid, Medicare. We're talking about the Department of Human Services, Health and Human Services, which is an exclusions list. Talking about the OFAC, the Office of Foreign Assets, contract and procurement. For healthcare, we're looking at TRICARE sanctions list. We're looking at the systems of award management, and then various financial lists like the federal FDIC. And then the list goes on and on and on with things like the ATF and DEA, FBI, and so forth. Well, Lisa will talk about some of the federal and state data.
Yeah, so the Federal Criminal Records Search product searches from 94 federal courts. Most records are name match only data, making it difficult to report. The source that is used for these records is the PACER database, which stands for Public Access to Court Electronic Records. We would never not recommend this search, but it is especially essential for roles including or involving federal regulations or security clearances. Also, anyone who handles money or financial records on behalf of an organization. The searches include offenses prosecuted by the FBI like drug trafficking, money laundering, embezzlement, fraud, hospital pharmacy theft, espionage, gang violence, crimes involving computers such as child pornography, etc. Federal searches are also needed for positions that require trust with federal agencies such as contractors, and they are also required by banks under the FDIC 19 rule.
And I would say that anybody that's on this call that's in healthcare should really make sure you're looking at these federal searches just because of the hospital pharmacy theft information and things of that nature.
Good point. So then we have state criminal record search. These search within a specific state's repository of criminal records. They provide a more focused and detailed review than a national or nationwide search, but still used mostly for pointer data. These vary in availability and access depending on the state. Some states don't have a statewide report that can be ordered at all. They can be used to supplement county searches depending on the state. They may be required for compliance with contracts depending on industry. It is still possible that we would have to use it as pointer data and order a county to verify any records, though. Accuracy is dependent on the state administrative office of the court process and how often they update case information.
I don't know, Alicia, what do you think? We've probably got maybe a third of the states around the country actually have state data that's worth looking at. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair to say. We're pretty confident with, yeah, probably a third of them. And then county criminal record searches are what we most prefer when reporting criminal records. They are the most accurate because they have the most up-to-date information. They're essential for verifying potential hits from the nationwide database search. If we see a potential charge when we're reviewing the nationwide and the county hasn't already been ordered for, then we'll go ahead and order the county to verify the charge. We'll never report a criminal charge, like Brad said, from the nationwide. County searches provide the most detailed court records, including dispositions, and in most cases, sentencing information as well. They are also critical for identifying misdemeanor and felonies that are not always included in the nationwide database search. It's always recommended to include 7 years worth of counties, meaning all counties that an individual has lived in for the past 7 years. And every state and county are a little different, so it's important to use researchers that are familiar with the area and have a relationship with the courts in that jurisdiction.
Yeah, and I thought too, we would provide a little bit of data with regard to our county criminal searches, just so you kind of see how we use that. So roughly there's 300 or 3,143 counties and county equivalent jurisdictions across the country. 70% of those counties are what we call automated. And by automated, we basically mean it's data, and we can get into their data without physically walking to the courthouse and capturing the information. As you can imagine, doing that automated process, we have turnaround times that are well less than 24 hours. I mean, some states we're getting it in a couple of hours. And then by the time we look at it and source it, we can get it back to you in less than 24 hours. So that means 30% of the country is what we call clerk assisted. And those are still having to walk into the local courthouse, still having to look at their public access terminals or physically talk to the clerk, depending on the size of that court. And I've listed here a number of states that are still clerk assisted. It's not every jurisdiction in these states, but probably 90% of them are still clerk assisted. It's really dependent upon the state administer the courts to really drive whether this information is automated or not. It really becomes a budgetary concern at the state level. Turnaround times, as you can imagine here, are a little bit longer, 30 to 48 hours for what we call clear reports, because we're literally having to send a researcher to that jurisdiction and walk in that courthouse and pull information. So turnaround time is also affected by weather. I mean, we're based in Evansville, Indiana, right across the river. Kentucky had huge floods earlier this month, and we had some local jurisdictions that were closed because of flooding. Technology can affect those automated states, so we see a lot of issues. So always check too our messaging on our portal for things like that may slow down jurisdictions that are important to you. Our turnaround time on average, and this is a blended number across the country for the last 6 months, is 17.41 hours. And we're seeing great improvement in that number as more become automated. And then our hit rate are those records that have criminal records on them is right at 18%. And that varies widely depending on what industry you're in too. I mean, I've seen some in the healthcare industry are extremely low, but yet some in some more high risk industries are even higher than that. So now we'll just kind of give you then kind of a summary of what we think is comprehensive versus basic. So I mentioned a minute ago that we see sometimes that some people will come to us and say, well, I'm buying this one package and it turns out to be that national criminal data only. And that is really not recommended because, as we've spoken earlier, there's lots of data that's missing there. We look at that as only pointer data. So it just doesn't give you enough information to truly provide background on anyone. So we have to add a county search to that. So when we talk about a basic search, we might do the current county of residence on an applicant to at least look at where they currently live. The danger in that, however, is the average person lives in 2.3 counties over a 7-year period. So you have obviously risk that someone has just moved to that current county and they may not have a record in that county, but they've got one in a neighboring county. Or if you're like in around Evansville, I mean, there's a lot of people that work in the neighboring county and live next door. And so you can miss records that way. But these basic searches are good for, let's say, renewals or annual checkups where your current employee base may not have changed that much. And so you're just really wanting to check and see if there's any change to that data, but you're pretty confident they still live in the same place. Or maybe doing it for volunteers and things of that nature that have a lower risk to your organization than possibly anyone else. So when we talk about comprehensive checks, now we really want to give this human verification. We want to look at accuracy. That's what we do. We've got an order review team that is digging in on all these records. As we said a minute ago, we've got to have those 3 personal identifiers to make sure we've got the right person. But we want to include that national criminal data, that Patriot data. We do a Social Security trace that gives us address history so that we can run all counties of records in the last 7 years. And then again, we've defined who needs that federal data because that is a different type of criminal report in those federal district courts. And so truly comprehensive, we would add that federal data to it. And then if you had to, because of regulations, we might supplement it with a statewide. I mean, many of our healthcare providers want that additional state data, even though it may not be all encompassing, it still fits or meets some regulatory requirement for auditing purposes. So that kind of puts it from kind of a higher risk basic check to a lower risk comprehensive check. And so last time I'm just going to turn it back over to Stephanie, which kind of will remind you of what our reporting standards are and then answer any questions that anyone might have.
Yeah, so now we're going to look, like Brad said, at RSI's 7-year criminal reporting standard. Many factors played a role in the decision to move to a 7-year reporting standard at RSI. So we have some of those listed here. Under the Federal Rule of Fair Credit Reporting Act, a criminal conviction is reportable forever, and non-convictions, including pending cases and deferrals, are reportable for 7 years from the charge date or file date. 9 states already imposed a 7-year restriction on all records, including convictions. And in addition to that, some records beyond 7 years in the states that do allow reporting are not complete or reliable. We also considered that county criminal searches are based on the 7-year address history and that most employees think the reporting limit is 7 years. And then overall, there has been an adjustment to employers' tolerance to different types of risk in line with the EEOC guidance on how criminal records should be used in a hiring decision. And in addition to that, many employers are now only considering a 7-year scope of records. With all of that said, while the baseline standard of our criminal reporting will be 7 years, RSI will continue to report major felony convictions to the maximum allowed. So all clients will continue to see major felonies for life, such as violence, sex crimes, etc. Clients in healthcare and child services will continue to see maximum reporting across the board, and any client can choose to receive the maximum reporting under federal and state law if necessary. So if you'd like to discuss a custom reporting scope for your company, please don't hesitate to reach out to the RSI Help Desk by emailing help@referenceservices.com so that we can add special instructions to your account. Now, before we get to our key takeaways, I just want to check in with Heather and see, have we had any questions come in?
I have not seen any questions in the Q&A or the chat yet.
Okay, so if you have those questions, please feel free to go ahead and submit those while I'm going through the takeaways, and we will do our best to answer them. So just a few reminders as we wrap up for today. Comprehensive screening is critical to protecting your organization from liability and maintaining a safe workplace or community. National and state data can have missing records, so county criminal data is the best reporting source. Redacted PII in various states is creating reporting challenges for our industry. It's also important for you to consider adding a federal criminal search for comprehensive screening and go beyond the basics to ensure maximum reporting. RSI follows the 7-year criminal reporting standard except for always reporting major offenses. As a reminder, as Brad mentioned earlier, please check the RSI news and announcements on the client portal often for important updates, including upcoming webinars, county delays, and compliance news. And as always, you can contact help@referenceservices.com with any questions you may have. A copy of the slides and recording will be emailed out to everyone who registered for the webinar within a few days. And I don't think I saw any additional questions. Heather, do you want to confirm?
Yes, no questions have come in.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. We really appreciate you joining us today for our webinar.
Yeah, thanks, everyone.